The rain was falling gently on the streets of Los Angeles, making the city look almost peaceful. It was a rare moment of quiet for Keanu Reeves. After years of movie sets, interviews, and endless travel, he finally had some time to himself. He sat in a small corner cafe, tucked away from the busy roads, sipping his black coffee. The cafe was quiet, with only the soft hum of conversations around him and the distant sound of jazz playing from the speakers. Outside the window, people rushed past with umbrellas, their faces hidden from the world, but inside, Keanu felt strangely exposed, as if the memories from his past were suddenly sitting across from him. For some reason, his thoughts kept returning to his childhood, to those tender years when life felt both fragile and safe. He remembered his mother's smile, and more vividly, he remembered her kindness in choosing Eliza, a woman who became more than just a nanny to him. She was the one who held him when he cried, read to him at night, and made him feel protected when everything else seemed uncertain. Miss Eliza had been a constant presence, gentle but firm, always ready with a warm hug or a patient word. But as life went on, fame came, and childhood faded. He had lost touch with her. Years passed like turning pages in a book too fast to read. Just then, an old friend from school, Mark, walked in. He spotted Keanu immediately and gave him a small wave before ordering his drink. They hadn't seen each other in years, but when Mark sat down at the table, their conversation flowed naturally, full of memories and laughter. And then, without warning, Mark said something that made Keanu freeze. "You know," Mark began, stirring his coffee, "I saw an elderly woman the other day at this tiny cafe near Chinatown. She was working the counter, smiling at everyone, serving coffee and pastries, even though she looked, well, honestly, she looked like she should have retired long ago. I asked her name because she seemed familiar. Her name was Eliza." The name hit Keanu like a thunderclap. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't even process what he had just heard. "Eliza?" He finally managed to whisper. "Was her last name Campbell?" Mark thought for a second and nodded. "Yes, Eliza Campbell." Keanu felt a deep ache rise in his chest. Miss Eliza, the woman who had practically raised him. Why was she still working at 87? What had happened in all these years? The question swirled in his mind, filling him with guilt, sadness, and a sense of urgency he hadn't felt in a long time. How could he have let so much time pass without checking on her? He had the means to help her, and yet here she was, working in a cafe at her age. His mind was racing. He could almost see her now, standing behind the counter, her hands shaking slightly as she served coffee to strangers, wearing a brave smile while carrying unseen burdens. He wondered what had happened to her life after he became famous. Did she follow his career? Did she think of him as often as he was thinking of her now? Or had life's difficulties kept her too busy to remember the boy she once cared for? Keanu could not sit still any longer. He thanked Mark quickly and stood up, his heart pounding. The cafe where she worked was not far. A short drive maybe. 15 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime away. As he drove through the wet streets, memories flashed before his eyes. Eliza reading him bedtime stories, fixing scraped knees, laughing at his childhood jokes. Those memories were warm, almost sacred, but now they felt distant, almost lost. When he reached the small cafe in Chinatown, he didn't get out of the car right away. He sat there, looking through the windshield, rain blurring the view. He could see inside. A simple little place with a few wooden tables and chairs, a glass display filled with pastries, and behind the counter, a small woman with gray hair tied in a neat bun. Even through the glass and rain, he recognized her posture. The way she gently leaned forward to listen to customers, her smile that seemed to light up her tired face. It was Eliza. There was no doubt that Keanu felt a tight knot in his chest. He had faced cameras, crowds, and critics, but this moment felt harder than all of them. He was afraid. Afraid that she wouldn't recognize him, afraid that she might not want to see him, afraid that she had suffered alone all these years while he lived a life of fame and fortune. But he knew he couldn't drive away. He had to go inside. He owed it to her and to himself. He opened the car door and stepped into the rain, pulling up the hood of his jacket. Every step toward the cafe door felt heavier than the last. As he reached the entrance, he paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. Inside, Eliza was wiping down a table, smiling kindly at a young couple as they thanked her. She looked tired, but there was a quiet dignity in the way she moved. It broke his heart to see her working so hard at her age. He reached for the door handle but stopped, his fingers trembling. He watched her for another moment, overwhelmed by memories and emotions. Then, slowly, he pulled the door open, a small bell chiming as he entered. The cafe was warm, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filling the air. Eliza didn't notice him at first. She was busy behind the counter, carefully arranging pastries on a tray. Keanu walked to an empty table near the window and sat down, his heart beating so loud he could hear it. He didn't speak, didn't order anything. He just watched her, waiting for the right moment, feeling both grateful and ashamed. He noticed every small detail about her, the lines on her face, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she smiled kindly at every customer. Despite what must have been aching feet and tired bones, he wondered how long she had been working here, why she hadn't retired, why she was still pushing herself so hard. He could feel tears welling in his eyes, but he blinked them away. He had to be strong. He had to understand her story before he revealed himself. And so he waited, silently, watching, remembering, and preparing himself for what was sure to be one of the most emotional moments of his life. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside the cafe, time seemed to slow down. Keanu Reeves, one of the most famous actors in the world, sat quietly, unnoticed, waiting for the right moment to reconnect with the woman who had shaped his childhood. He knew that this was not going to be easy, but he also knew that this was something he had to do, not just for Eliza, but for the boy he used to be, the boy who had once felt safe in her care. As Eliza wiped the counter one more time and turned around, their eyes met for the briefest second, but she didn't recognize him. Not yet. Keanu took a deep breath and whispered to himself, soon. The cafe felt both too small and too vast all at once. Keanu sat there, still, almost afraid to move. Every glance toward Eliza was a pull on his heart. She looked older, of course. There were deep lines on her face, and her frame seemed more fragile than he remembered, but there was still something about her presence, a quiet strength, a dignity that had not faded with time. Keanu stayed seated for a few moments longer, watching her with care. She didn't notice him. She was busy serving another customer, gently setting down a plate of warm pastries in front of a young woman and her little child. Her smile was the same, soft and reassuring. It was a smile that once made him feel safe, a smile he had almost forgotten but now realized he had carried with him all his life. Inside, Keanu felt a mixture of emotions he couldn't easily name. Guilt was one of them, yes. All these years had passed, and he had done nothing to check on her. He had let life sweep him away, movies, fame, endless commitments. But the woman standing behind the counter now was not a stranger. She was a piece of his soul. She was family, even if not by blood. The bell above the door jingled as more customers came and went. The cafe was busy for a small place. Eliza worked quietly, never rushing, never showing a hint of tiredness even though he could sense she must be exhausted. Her movements were careful but steady, as if she had learned to work through pain. Keanu single quotes, S fingers traced the rim of the empty cup in front of him. His mind was spinning with memories, each one clearer than the last. Eliza brushing his hair before bed, tucking him under the blanket, singing softly when he was afraid of the dark. She had been the one constant during difficult years. And now here she was, still giving her warmth and kindness to the world, even though she should have been resting. He realized he could not sit there any longer. His hesitation would soon turn into regret. He needed to speak to her, but how? How do you say hello to someone you have not seen for decades? How do you bridge the gap of so many lost years? Just then, Eliza walked past his table, carrying the tray of empty dishes. Their eyes met for only a second. She smiled politely, but there was no sign of recognition in her gaze. It broke his heart. But how could he expect her to recognize him? Right away, the last time she saw him, he was a boy. Now he was a man with gray beginning to touch his hair and years of life written on his face. When she passed again, he found the courage to speak. "Excuse me," he said softly. She turned toward him, still with that same kind smile. "Yes, dear, how can I help you?" Keanu took a breath. His throat felt tight. I would like a coffee, please." "Black, like I used to have as a boy," she chuckled gently. "Oh, you must have been a serious boy then," she said, walking back behind the counter. "Most children want sweet cocoa, not black coffee." He watched her prepare the drink carefully, her hands steady despite her age. He wondered if she felt the same ache in her joints that he could see in her movements. When she brought the cup to his table, he met her gaze again. "Thank you," he whispered, pausing. Then he added softly, "Miss Eliza." She froze for a second. The tray in her hand trembled slightly, and she set it down slowly. Her eyes narrowed, looking more closely at him now. It was as if his face was suddenly unlocking old doors in her memory. "You know my name," she said, her voice soft but curious. Keanu gave her a gentle smile. "Yes," he replied. "You used to read me stories before bed. You used to hold me when I cried. You used to call me your special boy." Her eyes widened, and then her lips parted slightly in disbelief. She leaned forward, peering at his face, searching through the years that had passed between them. "No," she whispered. "It can't be, Keanu?" He nodded, his eyes wet but smiling. "Yes, Miss Eliza, it's me." For a moment she didn't move. It was as if time itself had stopped in that tiny cafe. And then, suddenly, tears filled her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. She reached out her trembling hand, touching his face gently, as if to make sure he was real. "Oh, my boy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My dear boy." Keanu stood up slowly and embraced her. He felt her frail arms wrap around him, and he held her carefully, afraid she might break. But she was still strong in a way that went beyond physical strength. Around them, the cafe fell silent. Customers watched the scene quietly, sensing something profound was happening, but not wanting to interrupt. He could feel her sobbing softly against his chest, and he let her take her time. There was no rush. This was a reunion that needed to happen slowly, with care. After a long moment, she pulled back slightly, wiping her tears with the corner of her apron. "I never thought I would see you again," she said. "I followed your movies, you know. Every time I saw you on the screen, I felt so proud. But I didn't think you would remember me after all these years." Keanu smiled, though his heart ached. "I could never forget you, Miss Eliza. You were my family, you still are." She smiled back at him, though her tears kept falling. "You were always a kind boy, always polite, always gentle. I'm so happy to see that hasn't changed." Keanu sat back down, motioning for her to sit with him. But she shook her head gently. "I'm still working, dear," she said. "My shift isn't over yet." His smile faded slightly. "Miss Eliza, why are you working? You should be resting. You should be enjoying life." Her eyes softened, and she looked down for a moment before meeting his gaze again. "Life didn't turn out the way I hoped, dear. After my husband passed, things became difficult. There were bills. Then medical expenses. I had to keep working to stay afloat. I don't mind it, really. I like being useful, but it is tiring now. Keanu felt a sharp pain in his chest. This woman had given so much to him, had cared for him when he needed love and security most. And now she was standing here, tired, worn, and yet still smiling, still serving others with grace. He wanted to help her right then and there, to tell her she didn't need to work another day in her life. But he held back, knowing this conversation needed time and care. "When is your shift over?" he asked gently. "Soon," she replied. "Just another hour or so." Keanu nodded. "Then I'll wait. And after your shift, we'll sit and talk properly, like old times." She smiled warmly, wiping another tear from her cheek. "I would like that very much, dear, very much." And so he waited. He watched as she returned to her work, wiping tables and serving customers. But now she kept glancing back at him, her eyes filled with joy and disbelief. Every time their eyes met, they shared a quiet smile that spoke volumes of shared history, of care, of time lost. But now found that Keanu sat there, feeling more grounded than he had in years. Fame, fortune, none of it mattered right now. What mattered was this moment, this reconnection, this chance to show kindness and respect to a woman who had once given him so much. He promised himself silently that this was just the beginning. He would not lose her again. He would make sure. She never had to work another day unless she chose to. He would be there for her, the way she had always been there for him. That the hours inside the cafe passed slowly but beautifully. Keanu never took his eyes off Eliza as she continued her shift. He watched how she treated every customer with kindness, no matter how tired she must have felt. He saw her gentle way with a child who dropped his cookie, and how she gave the boy a new one without asking for payment. He noticed how she greeted each person as if they mattered, as if they were part of a community she had built quietly through years of service. But behind her smile, Keanu could see the signs of struggle. Her hands trembled slightly when she lifted a heavy coffee pot. Her steps were careful but sometimes uncertain, as though her feet ached. It broke his heart. No one this kind should have to work so hard at such an old age. Especially not someone who had once cared for him as though he were her own. Finally, as the clock on the wall reached closing time, Eliza removed her apron. Her shoulders drooped slightly with exhaustion, but when she looked at Keanu, her face lit up with joy. Her eyes, though weary, sparkled in a way that made her look almost young again. "You waited," she said softly as she approached his table. Keanu stood up immediately and nodded. "Of course I waited, Miss Eliza. I would wait all night if I had to." She smiled, wiping her hands with a towel before sitting across from him. It felt so natural, like all those years ago when she would sit beside him and read bedtime stories. But this time, they were both older, carrying different memories and different burdens. "Tell me everything," he said gently. "I want to know what happened after we lost touch. I want to know your story." Eliza took a deep breath. For a moment, her gaze drifted toward the window, where the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind clean streets that glowed softly under the evening lights. Then she turned back to Keanu, her face calm but her voice carrying a quiet sadness. "After your mother passed," she began, "things became hard for me too. Your family moved on, and I had to find new work. I cared for other children for a while, but over time, fewer families needed a nanny as old as me. When my husband died 10 years ago, everything became more difficult. I had to sell our little house to pay for his medical bills. I moved into a small apartment. My pension was not enough. So I started working here. It's a simple place, but it keeps me busy, and I meet kind people." Keanu felt her words sink deep into his heart. He tried to imagine her quiet suffering, her determination to keep going even when life had turned hard. She had lost so much, yet she had kept her dignity. Her resilience was humbling. "You should not have had to do all this alone," he said, his voice almost breaking. Why didn't you reach out to me? I would have helped you, Miss Eliza. I would have done anything. She smiled softly, her hands folded on the table. I didn't want to bother you, dear. You had your own life to live. I was proud of you watching from afar, and I always felt, well, that I was just a chapter in your story. I didn't expect you to come back for me. Keanu shook his head slowly, tears forming in his eyes again. You were never just a chapter. You were the foundation of my childhood, everything good that I became. I owe much of it to you. There was a long, tender silence between them. The noise of the world outside felt distant now. Inside the small cafe, there was only the warmth of this reunion, the heavy weight of time lost, and the quiet promise of making things right. I live nearby, Eliza continued gently. A small apartment just a few blocks away. It's simple but comfortable enough for me. And I still enjoy walking to work in the mornings. It keeps me feeling useful, you know? I don't like the idea of being a burden. Those words stung Keanu more than she knew. He saw no burden when he looked at her, only a woman who had given selflessly and deserved peace, rest, and joy in her final years. He leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. You are not a burden. You never were, and you never will be. I can't go back and fix all these years we lost, but I promise you this. From today, you will not have to work unless you truly want to. I will make sure of it. Eliza smiled again, but this time there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. Oh dear, she said gently. I appreciate that, I truly do. But I've managed fine all this time. I don't want to trouble you. You have your own life. My life would mean nothing if I can't take care of the woman who cared for me when I needed it most, he replied. There was a long pause. For a moment, Eliza seemed unsure how to accept such an offer, such kindness. She had lived for so long without anyone looking after her that it almost felt unfamiliar, even strange, to have someone now saying they wanted to help. But in her eyes, there was gratitude. Deep, quiet gratitude. Keanu reached across the table and gently took her hand in his. I mean it, he said. This is not charity. This is love, Miss Eliza. You gave me love when I needed it most. And now it's my turn to give some back to you. Her lips trembled slightly as tears welled up again. You were always such a sweet boy, she whispered. Keanu smiled through his own tears. And you were always my home. Their hands remained clasped on the table as they sat quietly, lost in emotion and memories. Around them, the staff of the cafe had begun cleaning up, but no one interrupted them. Even strangers could feel that something special was happening in that small corner. Then, softly, Eliza spoke again. I kept something from your childhood, she said, her voice gentle and filled with meaning. Something I've held onto all these years. Keanu tilted his head, curious. What is it? She smiled, her eyes glistening. I'll show you next time you visit me. It's something from your mother. Those words sent a shiver through Keanu's heart. Something from his mother, the woman he lost so young, the woman who had left a hole in his life that even time and success could never fill. What could it be? Why had Eliza kept it for so long? He felt an unexpected rush of emotion and anticipation. Whatever it was, it would matter deeply to him. It would connect him to a part of his past he had longed for but could never touch. He nodded slowly, feeling overwhelmed but also peaceful. I will visit you tomorrow, he promised. And we'll talk more. I would like that very much, Eliza said. The evening air was cool as they stepped outside the cafe together. Keanu offered her his arm, and she took it gently. They walked slowly down the street, their steps easy and familiar, as if no years had passed between them. He walked her to her small apartment building, pausing outside the door. She thanked him for the company and promised to prepare tea when he visited the next day. As she disappeared inside, Keanu stood for a long moment on the sidewalk, looking up at the night sky. His heart was heavy but also filled with a new purpose. This was not the end of their story. This was just the beginning of something beautiful. A chance to give back, to heal, to reconnect with kindness and humility. The next morning arrived. Slowly, with soft golden light filtering through the windows of Keanu's quiet home. But his mind had been awake long before the sun rose. He could not stop thinking about Eliza, about the gentle but weary way she carried herself, and most of all, about her words, that she had kept something from his mother for all these years. Those few words stirred something deep inside him, a longing that had always been present, but hidden beneath the surface of busy days and demanding roles. For so long, he had wished for another connection to his mother, some piece of her that felt personal, private, and real. Now, after all this time, it seemed that Eliza had quietly held onto that very thing, waiting for this moment, waiting for him to return. Keanu dressed simply, no rush, but his movements were thoughtful. Today felt important, almost sacred. He picked up a small bouquet of fresh flowers from a street vendor on the way, remembering how his mother used to love wildflowers and wondering if Eliza might too. When he arrived at her apartment building, he paused outside the door, taking a deep breath to calm the swirling emotions inside. Then he knocked gently. It didn't take long for Eliza to answer, her face lighting up when she saw him standing there. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore a simple cardigan, but there was warmth in her smile that made her look years younger. "You came," she said softly, as if she still couldn't quite believe this was real. "I promised I would," Keanu replied gently, handing her the flowers. "For you." She accepted them with a smile that spoke volumes, carefully placing them in a glass vase on a small table near the window. Her apartment was modest, but it was cozy, filled with little touches that showed her character. There were old photographs on the walls, a few worn books stacked neatly on a shelf, and a hand-knitted blanket folded over the arm of her chair. "Please, sit," she said, motioning to the small sofa near the window. "I made tea." Just like old times. Keanu sat down, feeling more at home in this small, simple space than he often did in the grand, luxurious places he had visited around the world. There was something grounding about being here, about being with Eliza again. She poured the tea carefully, her hand still steady despite her age, and handed him a cup with a gentle smile. For a few moments, they sat quietly, sipping tea and enjoying the simple peace of the morning. But Keanu's mind kept returning to the thing she had mentioned the night before. Finally he spoke, his voice soft but curious. "You said you kept something from my mother. May I see it?" Eliza nodded slowly, setting her cup down on the table. She rose from her chair and walked carefully to a small wooden chest near her bookshelf. She opened it gently and reached inside, her fingers brushing over something before lifting it out. When she turned back toward him, she was holding a small envelope, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. "Your mother gave this to me the night before she passed," Eliza said softly, her voice carrying the weight of memory. "She asked me to give it to you when the time was right. But after she was gone, and after your life became so busy, I didn't know when that time would be, and then years passed, and I still waited." She placed the envelope gently into Keanu's hands. "But now," she continued, her eyes shining with both sadness and peace, "now feels like the right time." Keanu's hands trembled as he held the envelope. It was light, almost fragile, but to him, it felt as heavy as the world. He traced the writing on the front, his name, written in his mother's graceful handwriting. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Eliza smiled gently. "You don't have to read it now. Take your time, it's yours." But Keanu couldn't wait. Not now, not after all this time. He opened the envelope carefully, unfolding the letter inside. The paper was thin and delicate, but the words were strong, alive, as if his mother were speaking directly to him across the years. My dearest Keanu, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means life has brought you to a moment when you are ready to hear these words. I want you to know how deeply you are loved, and how proud I am of the person you are becoming. You have always had a kind heart, a gentle soul, and a strength that will carry you through life's hardest moments. As he read, tears streamed down his face. His mother's words were filled with love, warmth, and quiet wisdom. She spoke of her hopes for him, her belief in his goodness, her wish that he would always choose kindness, humility, and resilience. Eliza sat quietly as he read, respecting the intimacy of the moment. When Keanu finally looked up, his eyes were wet but shining. Thank you, he said again, his voice breaking. Thank you for keeping this all these years. This means more than I can ever say. Eliza reached out and gently placed her hand over his. Your mother loved you very much, she said. She knew you would grow up to be a man with a beautiful heart, and she was right. They sat in silence again for a moment, the air filled with unspoken emotions. Then Keanu looked around her small apartment, taking in its simplicity and realizing fully that she had lived here, alone, quietly, for so long. It was time for her life to change. Miss Eliza, he said gently but firmly, I want you to know that you never have to work another day unless you want to. I've arranged everything. Your debts are cleared. I've set up a trust fund so you will always have what you need. You can rest now. You can enjoy life. Her eyes widened in shock. Oh, Keanu, she whispered. That's too much. I can't accept. But he interrupted her gently. You can, and you must. This is not charity. This is love, Miss Eliza. This is gratitude. You cared for me when I needed it most. Now let me care for you. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a weight finally lifted after many lonely years. You are a good man. Keanu Reeves, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. You always were. He smiled through his own tears. And you, Miss Eliza, are the reason why. For the next hour, they sat together, talking, laughing gently at old memories, rediscovering a connection that had never truly disappeared. Keanu listened carefully as Eliza told him stories about his childhood, things he had forgotten or never known. She spoke of the times he made her laugh, of the kindness he showed even as a small boy, of how proud she felt as she watched him grow. It was a beautiful morning, filled with warmth, nostalgia, and healing. But just as they were finishing their tea, something unexpected happened. Eliza placed her hand on her chest suddenly, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. It was brief, but Keanu noticed immediately. Are you all right? He asked quickly, concern flooding his voice. She nodded with a smile, but her eyes looked tired. Just a small ache, dear. Nothing to worry about. I'm just an old woman now. But inside, Keanu felt a new resolve rising. This was not the end of their story. Not yet. He wanted her to have joy, to see the world, to experience moments of beauty she had long put aside. He reached across the table again, squeezing her hand. Gently, then let's plan something together, an adventure. Anywhere you want to go, anything you want to do, we will do it. Eliza looked surprised but touched. An adventure? She asked softly, a smile spreading across her face. Yes. Keanu said, his voice warm and full of promise. You've spent your whole life caring for others. Now let me take you somewhere you've always dreamed of. For a moment, she was speechless. Then she laughed, a soft, joyful sound. All right, dear, she said, but only if you promise we'll take it slow. Old legs don't move as fast as they used to. Keanu smiled, his heart full. I promise, Miss Eliza. We'll go at your pace. This is your time now. The days after that morning at Eliza's apartment felt almost dreamlike for Keanu. His life, which was usually filled with scripts, cameras, and endless travel, suddenly felt different, slower, softer, and far more meaningful. Every spare moment he had was now devoted to spending time with Eliza, planning what he was determined would be the most beautiful adventure of her life. He hired a travel planner but kept things simple, just as Eliza would have liked. Together, they sat side by side at her little kitchen table, looking through books and brochures. Every page they turned felt like a glimpse of freedom for her, a chance to see parts of the world she had never thought she'd experience. "Is there anywhere you've always dreamed of going, Miss Eliza?" Keanu asked softly one afternoon. She smiled thoughtfully, her hands wrapped gently around a cup of tea. "When I was a young girl," she began, "I used to dream of sitting quietly by the sea, watching the waves. I don't know why, maybe because it always seemed peaceful. I never made it though. There was always work to do." Her voice was gentle, almost wistful. Keanu felt that ache inside again, the ache of knowing this wonderful woman had lived her life serving others, but had put her own dreams quietly aside. "Then that's what we'll do," he said firmly. "We'll go to the sea." Eliza chuckled softly. "That sounds lovely, dear, but remember, I'm not as young as I used to be." "Then we'll take it slow," Keanu replied, smiling gently. "No rush. We'll just enjoy every moment." In the following days, they prepared for the trip. Keanu took care of everything, arranging for her medical needs to be supported, ensuring comfort at every step and making sure she felt safe. He could tell she was a little overwhelmed at first, not used to being the one cared for, but as they spent time together, she began to relax, her old spark returning. Soon they were on a quiet flight, heading to a peaceful seaside village, far from the noise of Los Angeles. The village was small, beautiful, and untouched by crowds. The air smelled of salt, the skies were soft blue, and the sound of waves could be heard from every little house when they arrived. Keanu watched Eliza carefully as she stepped slowly onto the soft sand for the first time. She paused, closed her eyes, and let the breeze touch her face. It was as if something inside her was healing, just standing there. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. Keanu smiled, quietly watching her, feeling deeply grateful that he could give her this moment. He didn't rush her. They sat together on a wooden bench overlooking the ocean, watching the sun slowly set. Its colors painted the sky with gold, pink, and orange, and the reflection danced softly on the water's surface. It was perfect. Quiet, simple, but perfect. Each day that followed, they spent time just being present, walking slowly along the shore, sitting in the gentle morning light, or sharing simple meals outside while the sea breeze played with Eliza's silver hair. She laughed more during these days than Keanu had seen since their reunion, and each time she laughed, it felt like a gift. But even amid this peaceful joy, Keanu couldn't ignore a quiet worry that had crept into his heart. He noticed that sometimes Eliza would pause suddenly, catching her breath, a brief shadow of pain crossing her face before she smiled again. She would wave it off, saying she was fine. But Keanu could sense that her body was more fragile than she let on. One evening, after a particularly beautiful sunset, they sat together on the veranda of their cottage. Eliza looked tired, more so than usual. She leaned her head gently on Keanu's shoulder, a peaceful smile on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "for all this, for making me feel special again." Keanu gently took her hand in his, squeezing it softly. "You've always been special, Miss Eliza. You just forgot for a little while." She chuckled, her voice soft and light. "You always did know how to make me smile." As the stars appeared one by one in the sky, Eliza grew quiet, her breathing slow and calm. Keanu stayed still, holding her hand, watching the night sky above them. But inside, he couldn't shake the sense that this journey, as beautiful as it was, might be more than just a trip. It felt like a farewell. He remembered how she had touched her chest a few days before, how she sometimes paused to catch her breath, how she tired easily even though she never complained. She was growing. Weaker, he could feel it. But she kept smiling, kept enjoying every moment as if she was savoring every second of this gift. And then, as they sat quietly, she spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "My dear boy," she said, This is all I ever wanted. To feel remembered, to feel loved." Keanu closed his eyes tightly, feeling tears rise. "You are loved, Miss Eliza. More than you know." She smiled gently, leaning her head against him. "I know, dear, I know." The next day, Keanu woke early to check on Eliza. She was sitting quietly by the window, looking out at the sea, wrapped in a soft blanket. When he greeted her, she smiled. Warmly, but there was a tiredness in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. They spent another peaceful day together, talking softly, sharing stories of old times, laughing gently at small memories that only the two of them could share. Keanu listened carefully to everything she said, memorizing every detail, every word. But that evening, as they sat together watching the sunset again, Eliza rested her head on his shoulder one last time, her breathing slow and soft. Her hands were warm in his, her smile peaceful. And quietly, without fear, without regret, she closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, then stopped, and she slipped away gently, as peaceful as the waves that rolled softly onto the shore. Keanu sat there for a long time, holding her hand, tears falling silently down his face. He felt grief, yes, a deep sorrow that he had lost this beautiful soul. But there was also peace, because he knew that her final days had been filled with joy, care, and dignity. He had kept his promise. He stayed beside her through the night, watching the stars above, remembering her laughter, her kindness, her resilience. She had lived her life serving others, and he was grateful beyond words that he could give something back before it was too late. In that moment, under the stars and by the sea, Keanu realized something profound. Time is precious, love is simple, and kindness is what gives life meaning. The morning sun rose gently over the seaside village, casting a golden glow over the quiet cottage where Keanu still sat. The waves moved slowly, their rhythm soft and constant, as if the sea itself was mourning, yet honoring the life that had just passed in peace. Eliza was gone now, but her presence still felt strong, in the breeze that touched the curtains, in the scent of tea that lingered faintly in the air, and most of all, in Keanu's heart. For hours he sat in stillness, watching the sea as he held her hand one last time. He did not rush this farewell. He wanted every moment to matter, to respect the woman who had taught him what care and kindness meant long before he knew what fame was. She had been his comfort, his stability, and now he felt that part of him was quieter, but somehow stronger because of her. When the time finally came, Keanu made arrangements with the utmost care and respect. He ensured that Eliza's remains would be honored exactly as she would have wanted, simple, beautiful, full of dignity. No extravagant gestures, just love, sincerity, and warmth. He carried her memory back to Los Angeles, and when the day came for her memorial, he made sure it was exactly right. It was a small, intimate gathering in a peaceful garden surrounded by trees and flowers. Only a few people were invited, those who would truly appreciate who she was, even if they had never met her personally. He spoke softly to the gathered guests. "This is not just a farewell," he began, his voice steady but tender. "This is a celebration." Eliza Campbell was more than a nanny. She was a teacher of patience, of grace, of love. She taught me what it means to care without expecting anything in return. And she taught me that kindness is the most powerful gift we can give. His words were met with quiet tears from those who listened. Some of his closest friends, fellow actors, people who had worked with him for years, sat silently, moved by the deep sincerity in his voice. Many of them had known Keanu as a generous and humble man, but today they saw why. They saw who had shaped that part of him. As he spoke, Keanu felt Eliza's presence beside him. Not just in memory, but in spirit, in the way the wind gently moved the leaves, in the way sunlight filtered softly through the trees, in the quiet hush that settled over the garden. After the service, Keanu took a simple wooden box containing Eliza's ashes to a quiet place by the ocean, a place where the water met the rocks gently, where the sky stretched wide and clear. He stood alone there, holding the box close to his heart. "You are free now," he whispered. "Free to rest, free to feel the peace you always deserved." And with deep care, he scattered her ashes into the wind. The breeze carried them out over the water, where they danced briefly before settling into the endless blue. It felt right. The sea that she had dreamed of as a young girl was now her final resting place. Peaceful, beautiful, infinite. But Keanu knew this was not truly the end. He would carry Eliza with him for the rest of his life. She would live in every small act of kindness he offered to others, in every patient moment, in every gesture of respect and humility. He returned to his home with a renewed purpose. Something inside him had shifted during this journey. Fame, success, wealth, none of it mattered without kindness at the center. Eliza had taught him that quietly, simply, without grand lessons or lectures, only through how she lived her life, and so he made a quiet promise to himself. He would honor her memory, not just with thoughts, but with actions. He would give back more freely, help others quietly, and offer kindness without expecting anything in return, just as she had done. In the weeks that followed, his friends and colleagues noticed something different about him. His smiles felt warmer, his silences deeper, his attention more present. They didn't know the full story, but they could feel the change. When asked about it, Keanu would simply smile softly and say, "I'm remembering someone who taught me what matters most." Sometimes, late at night, he would sit quietly in his own kitchen, a cup of tea in hand, looking out the window at the stars. He would think of Eliza, of the simple grace with which she had lived, and the gentle strength she had shown even in her final days. And always, he would feel grateful that life had given him the chance to find her again, to honor her, and to say the words that so often go unsaid. "Thank you. I love you. You mattered." Her photo now sat quietly on a small table in his home, not grand, not surrounded by awards or lights, just a simple frame with a simple picture. Eliza, smiling gently, just as he remembered her best, whenever he felt overwhelmed. He would look at that photo and feel grounded again, because Eliza had been more than just a caretaker of a young boy. She had been a caretaker of hearts, of dignity, of quiet kindness. And Keanu knew that her lessons would remain with him forever, guiding him to live not just a successful life, but a meaningful one.